Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of JA's Recipe for Success. I am Lori Salarulo, your host, the president and CEO of Junior Achievement of South Florida. I absolutely love doing the show. I hope that you've caught some of our past episodes with some of the leaders that we've spoken to. I love learning about people and what makes them tick, right? What makes them who they are? What makes them great leaders or entrepreneurs or community leaders for that matter, right? Making an impact in our community. And so I am just so thrilled that I have the pleasure to do that. And today I am honored. I was just sharing with our guests that I have watched her from afar and seen her at events and said, I'm going to meet that lady one day. And so today I have the pleasure of having her here with us. Chief Rhoda Mae Kerr, Fort Lauderdale's first fire rescue chief. Quite an accomplishment, that on its own. Jersey girl, I noticed she was born in the next town over. Fourth generation firefighter, Dolphins fan, golfer, just all around amazing trailblazer and powerhouse. So welcome, Chief Kerr.
Well, good morning, Lori. Good morning. So good to be here.
So great to have you. So, of course, I know that one of the first questions people will ask, and we're going to go back in time a little bit at some point, but I do have to ask straight out of the box, right? How, firefighting is a man's world, right? No doubt about it, right? You're in the minority.
As a woman. In the minority.
Yes. And especially as a fire chief. You're really in the minority, I would imagine. But I have to tell you, I watch Chicago Fire all the time. Love that show.
I watch it too, by the way.
Yeah. And the women are predominantly paramedics versus, right, the fire on the fire team. Talk a little bit about what that's like, right? And what that means for you. And I do want to talk about, because I'm sure at some point we'll talk about some of the challenges that possibly help shape you in a man's world. But just talk for a minute about being that.
Well, when you go back to when I started, which was 1983, we were very few women that were career firefighters. And the biggest challenges were always, and some of it was acceptance and being treated differently. I mean, even if you go right to the very beginning, just trying to get hired was the big challenge, because there's always a physical ability test, and that's important, to be a firefighter in that profession. But physical ability tests were constructed so that women couldn't pass, or we could pass, but we were scored. And so obviously on certain areas, the men could score higher, like how many pull-ups can you do in 2 minutes? And the more you did, the more points you got. So that was their way of keeping us out of the fire service. But one way or another, we managed to prevail, and it ended up with, a federal lawsuit at one point by the city of New York, the fire department there. The women filed a lawsuit, and that kind of changed what physical ability tests could look like. So that was the very first part. Then once you got in, the challenges were shared bathrooms. There were no bathrooms or showers designated for women. And in some cases, departments didn't even put locks on the doors, and so it was all those challenges, and then gear that didn't fit. Most women, not me, I'm tall, I'm almost 6 foot tall, so it's a little different for me. But for some of the women, smaller hands and gloves and boots, things just did not fit. Uniforms, all those things. So as we've evolved over the last, now I've been in the fire service 38 years, so we've certainly evolved. But I remember very clearly one time saying to myself, one of these days I'm going to be in charge and I'm going to be able to make a difference. So,
and I believe you have. So advocacy, right? You're talking about, right, the women coming together and making change like that. You talked about acceptance, right? And in a sense, discrimination in many ways. And I did see that in your bio and just watching some of your stuff on social media, that you are extremely involved in organizations, right, that are helping to raise up minorities, including women, right? Girl Scouts of America. And I love that, because we have to raise up our girls. So talk a little bit about acceptance, because, all of these videos, by the way, these shows, our students get to watch. And for those that don't know, we serve 55,000 students a year around entrepreneurship, workforce readiness, and financial literacy. And so much of it is built around confidence, right? And their success is built around confidence. And acceptance is so important to confidence. So how did you deal with that? Like, especially a young girl, I want them to hear that from you.
So, some of it is, first of all, confidence in yourself and your own physical capabilities. I mean, I think that was number one. And I also believe my height helped. I'm not a small, little tiny woman. I'm strong. I'm athletic, so that helped in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that the small women weren't just as confident or just as competent. But, I think it's just your own self-confidence to start with in your capabilities. And then I think it leads to learning how to establish relationships and knowing when you can tell people enough is enough, and being willing. You have to stand up for yourself, but you also have to know when you're the new rookie in the fire department, you're going to take a lot of heat. And, that pun intended, I think. And
I'm sure you get a lot of those.
Yeah. So, and I think that that all goes back to, you have to be willing to know that you're the rookie and you're going to have to take it, but you also have to stand up for yourself and never give up. I think it's perseverance, and don't let people mistreat you. And if people are doing something that's totally illegal, then there has to be a way that you can stop that. And, there has to be a pathway for you to follow. And that goes to your employer at that point, but so that's why I'm glad when I'm in charge, I can be sure that we have those pathways, and people feel they're being mistreated and they're not being treated fairly, that there's a pathway for that. So.
Yeah, such great stuff. I love all of that and such great ingredients. So let's go back for a moment. Born in Jersey, I saw.
Yes, I was. Little small town called Ringwood, New Jersey, way up in the country.
Yep. And then you spent a lot of time in Texas.
I did.
And so I noticed it said you were a fourth generation firefighter.
I am.
Sometimes we rebel, right? And we don't want to be whatever our parents are. How did you know that you wanted to be? Was it because of those role models that you had in your life? Was there ever any other path you thought you would take?
So, yeah, it's very interesting. First of all, when I got out of high school, which is a very long time ago, but and then got into college, women only did a couple of things. We were either teachers or nurses, and I'm putting this in quotes, secretaries, right? Or homemakers. We didn't do a lot of different things. Careers weren't really wide open to women at that time. So, I mean, even sports, we had women's intramural sports. We didn't have, varsity sports and things like that for women. So this was before Title IX. So, I think that I don't ever remember my great-grandfather as a child. I do remember my grandfather. So my great-grandfather, I do remember seeing a picture of him later in my life, obviously, standing there in front of holding onto the bridles of the horses with the steamer pumpers behind him. That's how long ago that was, right? And then my grandfather was a volunteer fire chief. And I do remember a little bit of that, especially pictures, at the firehouse. And they always had the women's auxiliary and all those kind of things. But my dad, more than most, and more than any of the other two, was he worked for the Forest Service. So, he did the forest fire, what he called forest fires, which we now call wildland fires. But so I didn't really start out always wanting to be a firefighter. But once I started, it was like, oh my gosh, there's no other career for me. This is the best ever. And so I think it was always in my blood. It just took a while to get there, because I was a school teacher for I taught school for like 13 years. So I taught physical education, health. I coached a number of different sports. So, it was kind of a great segue.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you have how many, several hundred people here. And I know when you were in Texas, it was even bigger than that. And so when you have a team that big as diverse, probably as you have, being that coach training, right?
Right.
Probably comes in very handy, I would think.
It does. And we have almost 500 people here, including our ocean rescue and our firefighters. We have a little over about 415 firefighters sworn, and then the rest 50 or so are ocean rescue, and then some civilian employees.
So tell me, as a coach, let's talk about a couple of things. One, diversity, right? So how do you ensure that your team is diverse, right? That all of our people, right, in our community are represented and have an opportunity to be a part of your team or to be a part of this industry?
So, sometimes it's a big challenge, and particularly up to this point, as an organization, we have required individuals to be both certified as a paramedic and to be certified as a firefighter in order to be eligible to apply to work for the department, at least in the more recent times. And I've only been here, actually tomorrow will be my 3-year anniversary being back with Fort Lauderdale. So I don't know, I know what it was like 20 years ago when I worked here before I left and then came back. But so sometimes requirements have adverse impacts. So, it may be if you want to improve your diversity, then we need to look at how we hire and what requirements we put on hiring. So in other words, we may hire a certified firefighter and a certified EMT, and then within the next 2 years of employment, they have to get their paramedic license. So sometimes, like I said, the requirements have adverse impact. So I think that's important. And then there's a recruitment process, and it starts when kids are little. And I always want to be sure that, like, we do things like go read at elementary school to kids, and particularly we'll pick, schools that have a large demographic, of the minority population, so that they can see what they can be, because you can't be what you don't see. So It's always important too. And I always put myself out there. And that's why I love working with the Girl Scouts, because they are so diverse and they are so inclusive, and they lift their girls up and they encourage them to be anything they want to be, and that nothing can stop you. And I truly believe that, so, I think it's also being an example and being a role model. If at the top of the department, there is somebody that looks different than all the rest of them, all white males. There's like blacks, and there's Hispanics, and there's Asian, and there's women, and there's men. And, so we have to see a great representation of our population in the organization.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's so important also to go out into the community, right? So you want all of that diversity. And so, of course, with diversity goes culture. But before we go down the culture pathway, I'm going to have us go to a little bit of a break for our audience so that they can see just a little bit about junior achievement and what some of our kids want to do when they grow up.
Good.
Please welcome tonight's presentation of What I Want to Do
When I Grow Up.
When I grow up.
I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck.
I don't want to cry when paying the bills.
When I grow up.
I don't want to be turned down for a business loan.
I don't want to borrow a lot for an education.
And then not know what to do with it.
When I grow up, I don't want to be paid less.
Told I'm underqualified.
Or overqualified.
When I grow up.
When I grow up.
I want to know how to save for my future. Find a job I like.
And start my own business.
When I grow up.
I want to know how to provide for my family.
And invest in my community. And make a difference.
When I grow up.
When I grow up.
When I grow up.
When I grow up. I just want things to be different.
At Junior Achievement, we promote economic empowerment through education. But we can't do it alone.
I love that video. It always gives me the chills.
I was thinking the same thing. It makes you tear up, and you really do want those things for our future.
Yeah. We're so fortunate. We have an amazing a partnership with Broward County Public Schools. We also serve South Palm Beach, but in Broward County, we serve every single 5th and 8th grader. And now we're talking about how can we also do the same with 11th graders. And a very big part of what we do and the whole 8th grade program is wrapped around career exploration. And the research shows that most of our kids only know about 5 to 7 jobs that are out there, mostly what their parents did or TV, right? And of course, they all want to be, social influencers these days, or, rappers or pop art, or NFL players or NBA players, So those are always in there, especially for the boys. But I think it's so important to get out there, and you talk a little bit about that. Whether it's with the Girl Scouts or reading to the community. I know that the fire department also has some programs at some of our schools. Lauderdale 6 through 12, I think, is one of those. And now I think that they're looking to do one in Pompano somewhere. And so in 8th grade, every single 8th grader comes to JA World after they've done the curriculum in the classroom. And it's all storefronts. You'll have to come for a tour one day. It's all storefronts that are focused on industries. And it's so interesting to me that by 8th grade, we're asking our students to choose a pathway, right? And so how do we light that fire? No pun intended, right? And create that passion around this, right? Especially in our girls. We have a program called Girls Rule. Same thing. We want them to hear from women like you, mentoring and all of that, speakers. And it was amazing last year. They don't know about all of this. And so the more we can expose them, the better. And so I love that you're so involved in the community. And I'm guessing that that's part of your culture.
Yeah, very much.
And so how do you create a culture? Because your teams are so spread out, right? You have firehouses. Did they call them fire stations?
Either one, houses or stations.
Yeah. So they're spread out amongst the county. So how do you create that culture from the top down when you're so spread out, especially?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm only the chief of Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. So
that's right. You're only Fort Lauderdale, right?
So our firehouses or stations, there are 12 of them right now that are situated strategically throughout the city. So, but we create that culture. First of all, firefighters love what they do. So that's always the first number one thing, and people love firefighters. And tell me, who doesn't love a big red truck, right? So we've got ingredients right there. And then, I think it's my own enthusiasm, first of all, for being out in public and being engaged in the community, and allowing individuals. Previously, maybe the chief wasn't so, he wasn't a big advocate of, doing community engagement. And for me, that's who we are. And I believe as an organization, even though we're a service organization, we still have to think about branding and marketing. So when I got here, we were changing moves. I've done some reorganization, and I've got somebody that's a chief officer that's over community engagement. And I have a chief officer that part-time is doing branding, marketing, and public information. And he does a fabulous job, along with being the assistant fire marshal. So we all do multiple tasks. But I think it's creating those opportunities and just having the same enthusiasm. And obviously, during the pandemic, what we were doing, but what they still loved doing, it was drive-bys for birthday parties and things. Like we'd send these trucks out, and they'd do a drive-by the house where the kid's birthday was, or we did it for one of our supporters, and she's a huge supporter of a foundation that serves first responders, and she was having her 100th birthday. So, and she loved our pink fire truck. I was able to get one of our trucks wrapped in pink, which was a fabulous, achievement. And so we made sure the pink truck drove by her house along with a couple other units for her 100th birthday, so it's that kind of stuff. And they love doing that, it's really easy to be engaged in the community. They love that kind of stuff. So, and I love to do it. Obviously, you can tell my passion. So it just becomes easy.
Yeah. And, obviously you're setting an amazing example, and people watch what we do, right? They don't listen so much to what we say sometimes, although they do listen to what we say, but they're watching to see if the words and the actions match, right? And obviously with you, they do see that. And so that's inspiring for most people. And so one of the other things, of course, and this being the Recipe for Success show, one of the other things that you always see depicted on TV is, especially in Chicago Fire, is that they love to cook. And so often I love when I go to the grocery store and I see our firefighters, they're shopping for the station, right? And cooking. Do they have cooks in each station? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, each station usually has a cook, and sometimes that rotates, different people cook, and it depends on who's on duty that particular day. But a lot of times there is a sort of person that it just ends up being the designated cook, but, firefighters work 24 hours on, and then they're off for 48. So when they come on duty at 8:00 in the morning, then, they get their duties done, and then, they'll do some grocery shopping, whatever it is they need to do. And then they'll prepare lunch and dinner for that particular 24-hour shift. And so, and they're very, a lot of them are very good cooks. So it's always nice to be the chief and be invited for lunch, or dinner. And I've been making station visits here over the last few months. I'm trying to make sure that I visit each one of the stations on each one of the 3 shifts. So you think about that, I have to make 36 visits, right? 12 stations, 3 shifts, right? And then each visit ends up being at least 2 hours, and so, but it's fun. I mean, I love sitting down, talking to them, and, if the tones go off, I'll jump on the truck and ride with them. And, so it's kind of fun. But yes, they're very good cooks. And, some cookbooks are done by firefighters, right? And then they have chili cook-offs and all kinds of things. But yes, we do.
Well, and so our calendars,
very good cooks,
right?
Yeah.
So certainly there's a brand of firefighter, right? When you think about the calendar, and it's really funny how we have these visions, right, ingrained in our mind. But to watch them when they're doing their work, as you said, especially with what's happening down in Miami right now, and the way that they are responding and how dedicated they are to helping people. But and I'm sure, like what's happening in Surfside, there's so much right, negative or not so good, right? Things don't always turn out in a good way. I saw you posted recently about the cat, and so some things have a happy ending, right? And you get everybody out, or everybody is safe, but then there are times when they're not. How do you get the team right through times like that? Because I think that's when it's most difficult.
It is. And so there's a couple things. Firefighters, a lot of times, we have these tables that we sit around and when we have our meals. And so sometimes, we'll come back from a call and it's been a particularly hard one. And, we'll sit around and we'll talk. And sometimes it's humor, that gets us through that, and other times we have peer counselors. We also have a couple of chaplains that will visit with our firefighters and visit the stations after a particularly difficult call. Or I know that the peer counselors have been down in Miami or down in Surfside, talking to the first responders, and as the chaplains have been, and, they're providing support for the first responders. But it's difficult sometimes, and there's some things that you never forget, and they'll always be in your mind. And, sometimes you just learn how to make it less important, but it's always there. It's like when you lose a loved one, you never stop missing them. It just gets a little easier as time goes by.
Yeah, or compartmentalize, right? And
Yes.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have to just kind of put it in its own little box. But that support, especially
Yeah.
today, I think with what we've been through with the pandemic,
Yeah.
right? We're just seeing such increases, not only in our children, but I have a mom who's, now in her 80s, and I see it with the seniors, right? I see it with our young people. I see it with my own contemporaries, the depression, anxiety, right? And the isolation that we went through over the last year and a half. So it's good to see people getting back out and getting back to normal. And because relationships and being with your team and being with people, I think is so important,
And I think for the firefighters, that was one thing that we didn't experience because we were going to work every day, just like before.
Yeah.
We were not quarantining. We had to change how we were doing things tremendously, right? And protecting our own firefighters. But we were going to work every day. So they still had that socialization, and that interaction with each other, even though things had changed tremendously. But so I think, and that way, I was very fortunate. I was going to work every single day as well. It's kind of hard to run a fire department from home. You can't do that virtually. So
you can't fight fires.
That, sort of isolation, if you will.
Right.
And we live in a great place. So I could be out walking every single day, every morning, at 6 o'clock, I walked 3 miles, just for my own peace of mind. Right. Did my own workouts and, figured it out.
Yeah. So important to take care of our own minds and bodies, right?
Yeah.
So we can take care of everyone else. So I love all of this. I'm going to read back some of your ingredients because it's really interesting. Usually when we're in the kitchen at JA World, which is where we usually do this, and we'll get back to doing that in the next month or so, hopefully. We put them on a whiteboard, and so everybody gets to see the ingredients. And everybody's like, wow, when you see them all together, right? That's a pretty good recipe. So some of the ingredients that I pulled from our conversation in your recipe for success, advocating, fighting for what you believe in, for what's right. Talked about that a couple of times. Having confidence in yourself and your own abilities, building relationships, setting boundaries, right? Sticking up for yourself, for others. Never give up. Perseverance. I have a feeling that's going to be in your main ingredient somewhere. Just have a feeling about that. Follow your passion, right? For you, it was in your blood, you said, right?
Yes.
You followed it. Looking at the requirements of things, looking at life, sometimes we try to fit things into the box, but sometimes we have to reshape the box, right? And that's kind of what I heard you saying, so that we make sure that everyone has access to that box.
Yeah.
And don't let anything stop you. There's that perseverance again. Being a role model, a mentor, community-oriented, right? Giving back to our community and being involved. Branding and marketing. And I think that's interesting because I think that's important not only for ourselves, right? You brand who you are, right? The things that you put out there into the world, tell us who you are, as well as the branding and marketing, right, of the organization and of your team. Spending time with your people. I love that. We don't have that big of a team. We're only typically about 31 people. But even though they're not all my direct reports, I love to meet with everybody at least a couple of times a year. What are your dreams? What's happening, right? How are things going?
How's the baby, new family, just I want to know what they're doing. And,
Yep. You want to stay connected.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you saying. Staying connected to your people is part of your culture. Providing supports that they need and the resources, right? If they don't have the right tools to do their job, they're going to get hurt. Somebody else is going to get hurt. And then, of course, for you and for all of them, taking care of themselves, taking care of yourself, mind and body and spirit, I think is so important. So lots of really great ingredients. But I always ask everyone, so Chief Kerr, what is your main ingredient to success?
So, my 3 things that people ask me, what do I do to, stay calm and stress-free? And yes, there's a lot of stress, right? And so I always say it's red wine, dark chocolate, and humor.
I love it. I have never gotten those three ingredients.
I didn't think that you would. I don't know if I can tell eighth graders that that's the recipe for success, but
Well,
I
you
mean,
may have to get rid of the red wine part.
yeah. So, but I mean, I really, truly, I mean, I love to say that because, it brings humor to a whole situation, right? But I mean, I really think it is perseverance and passion and relationships. I think those three things are so critical to being successful.
So, you know what's so funny? Those are my three.
Uh-huh.
I had a feeling that's where I can just, I can usually sense from conversation where people are. There are others that are all about love and caring and empathy and those things. I'm a New Yorker. You're in New Jersey, girl. We're tough, right? And
They have to be tough.
exactly. And I'm half Italian, half Spanish. So Mediterranean blood, the passion, right, of course, has to be there. And I can tell you're a people person. So I had a feeling that those three in some combination were in there. But I love your main ingredients to success: red wine, dark chocolate, and humor. And you're right. We can't always take ourselves so seriously,
No,
right?
We can't.
So I love it. I hope that over the next few months we'll have, or at some point soon, we'll have a chance to meet in person.
I would like that.
Love to invite you out to JA World. Come visit you, whatever works, but definitely want to meet you in person. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing. I want our girls to hear your story. I'm like you. I believe I've started several girls and women's programs through JA, through Leadership Broward, a couple of others. It's just so important. I had amazing mentors in my life. I was so fortunate, right? And they were tough. Some of them were tough, right? Being in New York, some of those women were tough mentors, but they saw things in me that I didn't always see.
Yeah.
And we need to do that.
And and for me, a lot of my mentors, particularly in the fire service, were men, because there weren't. And I mean, I was one of the first women, to be a chief, and so, there weren't a lot of mentors out there. I mean, I have certainly been a mentor for others. So, I'm pleased to do that. So,
well, absolutely. And we're going to get all the women involved on your team in our girls' rules so that they can meet some of the women doing what you do.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And they can hear.
I just want to tell you one thing. For the first time in our 109-year history, we have a woman in every single rank in fire rescue and ocean rescue.
Woo!
Yep.
Way to go. I love it. Girl power, as we say, right?
That is it.
We all have our superpowers. That's the whole theme of Girls Rule, is about, really making sure that we help our girls to find their superpowers, their passion, as you said, and help them to learn how to bring that to life. And so thank you so much for being so open and sharing with us. And thank you for everything that you do for us, for the community, to keep us all safe. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, really. I had a great time. Love to do it again. Would love to visit. Would love to do something, anything we can do to promote women and girls, and I'm all for it. And anybody really, not just women and girls, but I think it's important, more so for women and girls, to know that what they can be and do besides being a mother
or right. Exactly. And you know what, though? I also think, look, 70% of the students that we serve are from our low income communities, right?
Right.
And that is so important. They don't have the exposure, right, that we're talking about, that some the other students have. Right. And that's our goal. Ours is access to every single Broward County student. Yeah, that's unique. And so we feel a great responsibility to that.
Yeah. And I would like to have a conversation with you sometime. And outside of this, I sit on a commission. It's called NIAC, the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. And it's a presidential appointment. And right now we are working on a workforce and talent management for critical infrastructure. And what we're finding is that there are many very good, high-paying jobs, but they don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. And that's where we're trying to it's always been looked at that you have to get a 4-year degree to get a great job. But when you think about, say, hydroelectric and power and, all those critical infrastructure that have to be kept running during any kind of time, everybody is important. So, and there's a lack of people applying and getting credentialed for those jobs. So maybe
I
we
think
can talk about that sometime, about how that could be part of, I can get a job and I don't necessarily need a 4-year degree, but guess what? I don't have to worry about crying when I have to pay the bills every month,
Right. And I hear that in some other industries as well, right? And I think the pendulum swung, right, where at one time, right, we taught trades and shop and all of those things, and then the pendulum swung and it was college only, right? When you come, because I know you'll come to the world, you'll see the marine industry is represented, the construction industries, the automotive industry, right, the retail, logistics. All of those different things. Now we're talking with manufacturers and the aerospace and the technology. And we need to have, first of all, public service, right, through the fire, but also, as you just said, those other jobs in infrastructure.
Transportation, power, and water treatment. There are certain industries that we cannot live without, no matter what, that are part of our critical infrastructure that have to be kept running or we fail.
Yep. Well, I love it. We're going to get together so we can make sure, because I can tell you, I didn't even think of all those jobs. I know our kids are not thinking of it. So thank you for that. And we will certainly do whatever we can to help them bring awareness to those jobs. So thank you again. And I will see you soon, and have an amazing rest of the week and a happy July 4th.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Let